Night's icy breath stole every last warmth from my bones as I lit the dying coals, until a soft, desperate gasp shattered the silence. Through the workshop's cracked door, I saw him, a stranger convulsing in the snow, lips blue as river ice. My heart thundered. My only blanket, the one hope between life and death, floated in my hands. In that frozen moment, giving it away felt like choosing another's life over my own. My shelter was little more than a crooked lean-to. Sheets of rusted tin nailed over warped planks, walls that whistled with every draft. That night, the wind howled like a beast, clawing at the gaps and scattering flakes of snow across my dirt floor. I crouched by a hearth of dying embers, coaxing what little warmth I could from the fading glow. My fingers ached, stiff from days of cold, and every breath puffed into white clouds that hung like ghosts in the lantern's light. Then came the sound, barely audible but sharp enough to slice through the storm. A broken gasp. A human sound. I froze, poker still in my hand. For weeks I had lived by silence, safe in the shadows of the city's forgotten alleys. But mercy is louder than fear. I pushed open the warped door. Snow swirled under the lantern's glow, blinding me for a heartbeat. Then I saw him, curled at the base of the lamppost, body shuddering with violent tremors. His coat was torn, one sleeve missing entirely, boots iced to the cobblestone. His lips were tinged blue, his eyes glassy with the weight of death's hand. "Hey," my voice cracked in the gale. "You can't stay there." He blinked up, eyes wide but fading, chest rising in broken rhythm. I ran back inside, grabbed the only thing between me and the frost, my patched wool blanket. It was thin, frayed from years of use, but it had saved me night after night. Now I wrapped it around him, pressing it close to his shoulders. The effect was immediate. His rigid body sagged, a sigh of fragile relief breaking through his cracked lips. "Inside," I urged, tugging at his arm. He stumbled, half collapsing against me. Together we crossed the threshold, the door slamming shut behind us with a thud that rattled my fragile walls. By the hearth, I poked the embers until they flared. The glow painted his face in trembling orange, revealing the raw lines of exhaustion, the hollowed cheeks, the haunted eyes. I filled a battered kettle with water, dropped in the last of my tea leaves, and sprinkled my final pinch of sugar. Steam rose like a hymn of hope. He sipped with trembling hands. "Thank you," he whispered, voice rough as broken glass. I smiled faintly, though my own skin prickled with cold. "Rest. You're safe here." The storm raged on outside, but within those cracked walls, silence settled. He clutched the blanket tight, eyes fluttering closed, as if trust was easier than breath. I sat beside him, half shivering, half watching. The truth was clear. I had given away more than a blanket. I had chosen another's survival over my own comfort. Dawn's light crept in, silver fingers through the gaps in my wall. I stirred awake on the floorboards, reaching for the blanket out of habit, but my hand met only emptiness. My eyes shot open. The bench was vacant. He was gone. Fear spiked through me. I grabbed my coat, stumbled outside, and froze at the sight. Footprints pressed deep into the frost, leading away from my shelter. My blanket draped his shoulders as he vanished into the waking city. I followed. The trail carried me into the marketplace, where merchants barked prices and children chased each other through carts of bread and barrels of fish. And there, by the fountain, I saw him. My blanket wrapped not around himself, but around a small child in his lap. The boy's eyes closed as warmth claimed him. My chest tightened. He hadn't stolen. He had passed the gift forward. Then the whispers began. "That's him," a merchant cried. "The scribe who vanished." He carried proof against the council. Faces turned. Fear. Wonder. Rage. The man's haunted gaze lifted to mine. He reached inside his coat and pulled free a thick envelope sealed with silver wax. the crest of the Merchants' Guild carved into its face. "They'll kill for this," he whispered, voice breaking. "Run, before it's too late." I lifted my lantern, its light catching on the seal. The crowd pressed closer, and through the market's rising panic, I realized the knight's mercy had bound me to something greater than survival. It had bound me to truth. He lifts the silver-sealed envelope, eyes blazing with both fear and defiance. "They'll kill for this," he warns, voice barely above a whisper. The crowd recoils as guards push through the stalls, hands on hilts. Lantern light glints on the captain's badge. Our only path now is forward, straight into peril. Footprints, glinting like silver scars on the frozen cobbles, beckoned me into the pre-dawn hush. With every crunch beneath my boots, I swore to repay the life I'd saved, no matter the cost. Beyond the narrow lanes lay the market's roar, a world of warmth I could only glimpse from the shadows. I stepped forward, lantern in hand, and plunged into the maze of merchants, secrets, and danger. The sky above the alley had only just begun to pale, a sickly shade of steel gray that promised neither dawn nor comfort. My lantern swung at my side, its glow a trembling island in a sea of frost. At my feet, the beggar's footprints carved a crooked path, one heel dragging as if every step exacted agony. Snow had hardened into glittering crust, each depression in its surface catching the lantern's light like a trail of molten silver. The city stirred around me. From shuttered windows, smoke curled into the air. Somewhere, a blacksmith's hammer rang against anvil in steady rhythm. The scent of fresh bread drifted from a nearby oven, mingling with the tang of wood smoke. Life moved on, heedless of secrets being dragged across its frozen stones. I stopped at the first cart I passed, crates of half-rotted apples stacked in frost-bitten pyramids. The vendor, a weary woman wrapped in woolen shawls, glanced at me through the haze of her breath. "Have you seen a man this morning?" I asked, lifting the lantern slightly. Blanket around his shoulders, walking with a limp? Her gray eyes lingered on me, then flicked to the cobbles. She shook her head once, brusque and guarded. "Too many strangers in this city," she muttered. "Keep walking." I obeyed, though unease curdled my stomach. The footprints led onward, weaving through the arteries of cobblestone streets, past bakeries with their shutters half open, past children lugging buckets of water that steamed in the chill. Everywhere I looked, the world was waking to its usual chaos, while I followed a ghost. The prints curved uphill toward the heart of the square. Vendors called their wares spices from the east, loaves hot from the oven, cured meats, salted and strong. Their voices rang bright, but beneath the cheer I heard the undercurrent of suspicion. Faces turned toward me, eyes catching on the lantern I carried. Whispers followed like cold hands on my neck. At the edge of the square, I saw the healer's sign, a caduceus crudely painted on warped wood, half obscured by ivy glazed in frost. Smoke rose from a small chimney above. The footprints ended there. I hesitated, breath pluming in the air. Then I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The healer's workshop was another world, cramped and warm, its air thick with the mingled scents of herbs and vinegar. Shelves bowed under the weight of jars, lavender sprigs pressed in oil, mustard seeds suspended in amber, powders and petals labeled in careful script. Light from a single lamp painted the plaster walls mustard yellow, every crack filled with shadows. And there he was. He lay on a narrow cot at the room's back, my blanket wrapped around his shoulders like a shield. His skin was pale, his lips still cracked from cold, but his eyes opened at the sound of my steps. They widened when they saw me. The chipped bowl of broth in his hands trembled dangerously close to spilling. "You're alive," I breathed, relief rushing through me like fire. His gaze darted to the envelope hidden beneath the blanket. Fear replaced surprise. "You shouldn't have followed," he rasped, voice hoarse. "It isn't safe." "I couldn't leave you," I answered. My eyes flicked to the silver seal glimmering faintly in lamplight. "What's in the letter?" He shook his head violently, clutching the envelope closer. "Names. Secrets. Blood bought with gold. If they discover it's here," his voice broke, "they'll burn this place. They'll burn us." Before I could press further, a knock rattled the door. Hard. Insistent. We froze. "Open up!" a voice barked from outside, harsh and official. "By order of the Merchants' Council." His face drained of color. He shoved the envelope into my coat pocket, hands trembling. "Hide it!" he hissed. The knock came again, louder this time. Wood splintered as a shoulder rammed against it. Dust sifted down from the beams. "Run," he urged, eyes wild. He pulled me toward a low cupboard near the back wall, where the boards sagged. I dropped to my knees, prying it open to reveal a narrow crawl space. Behind us, the door shuddered under another blow. The voices outside grew louder, angrier. We crawled into the darkness, lanterns sputtering in my hand, the smell of damp earth closing around us. Shouts and the crack of timber filled the room we left behind. My heart thundered as the tunnel swallowed us whole. We stumbled out into a narrow alley, snow drifting in pale ribbons from above. Behind us, the healer's door crashed inward, shouts rising like wolves' howls. He pressed the envelope deeper into my coat. We must vanish in the crowd. Ahead, the market square glowed with morning light, its archways both refuge and trap. Every step forward carried us deeper into peril, and closer to the truth. Flickering oil lamps painted trembling shadows across the healer's walls. He lay pale on a cot, my blanket clutched in his trembling fists. When I reached for the sealed letter, his desperation erupted like fire. In that suffocating hush, truth and danger collided, lit only by candlelight. The crawl space spat us into the back alley, frost stinging our faces. We ran until the sound of pursuit faded into the city's distant clamor. Only then did we duck into another door, deeper inside the healer's quarters, and collapse in a dim chamber thick with the scents of herbs and dust. A single oil lamp hissed on a crooked table, flame bending in the draught. Shadows trembled across the cracked plaster, turning jars of tinctures into ghostly silhouettes. The air was sharp with vinegar and lavender, but beneath it lingered something metallic, fear itself. He sagged onto the cot, clutching my blanket as if it alone kept him tethered to life. His cheeks glistened with fever sweat, lips trembling as he fought for air. I crouched beside him, lantern shaking in my hands, and felt the enormity of his burden press down on both of us. His gaze flicked to the silver-sealed envelope half visible in my coat. His fingers tightened around the blanket, knuckles white. "Don't," he whispered, voice raw. "You mustn't look." "Why not?" I asked, my voice low but unrelenting. He swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing like a drowning man. "Because once you know, there's no turning back. They'll kill you too." My chest burned with the weight of his words, but curiosity and resolve carved sharper edges into my fear. Slowly, deliberately, I drew the envelope from my coat and held it in the lamplight. The crest, 2 crossed keys beneath a crown, gleamed in molten silver. His eyes filled with panic. He lurched forward, trying to snatch it back, but his strength failed him. He collapsed against the cot, trembling. "Please," he begged. "Don't open it." I studied him, then the letter. "You risked everything to carry this," I said. "Let me share the burden." Silence thickened around us, broken only by the lamp's sputter and his ragged breaths. Finally he closed his eyes and exhaled, as though surrendering to a truth too heavy to bear alone. His hands shook as he pushed the letter toward me. "It's the ledger," he whispered, voice trembling. "Every bribe, every crime, the nobles, the judges, the council. They thought I'd destroy it, but I couldn't. It names them all." I froze, staring at the sealed flap that seemed to pulse with power. The ledger's weight pressed against my chest like a heartbeat, each throb a promise of either salvation or doom. They burned villages, he continued, voice breaking. Evicted families under false claims, raised grain prices by torching barns. They turned mercy into currency, and justice into ash. I saw it. I recorded it. Tears streaked down his cheeks, carving pale lines through the dirt. And now they'll kill us both to bury it. I pressed a hand to his trembling arm. Then we expose them, I said, fierce and steady. We bring it to the magistrate. His eyes widened, terror eclipsing hope. No, he hissed. You don't understand. They own the guard, the council, even the courts. If we walk into daylight with this, we'll be dragged to the gallows before we take 10 steps. The lamp's flame guttered, casting long shadows that swallowed his face. For a moment, I saw not a man, but a hunted ghost, haunted by secrets too monstrous for one soul. Before I could answer, the door rattled. Hard. Then again, wood splintering, voices barking outside. By order of the Merchants' Council, open this door. His fevered eyes locked on mine, wild and desperate. He shoved the envelope back into my coat pocket. Hide it! Take it and run. The door shook under another blow. Dust rained from the rafters. Torches flared through the cracks, throwing jagged light into the room. Stay close, I hissed, grabbing his arm. I swung the lantern toward the far wall, where plaster sagged and boards gaped. Together we stumbled toward it, his weight dragging against mine, the letter's sharp corners digging into my ribs. The door burst inward with a deafening crack. Torches and steel flooded the chamber. We shoved aside the boards and slipped into a crawl space just wide enough for our shoulders. The tunnel swallowed us in darkness, lantern guttering. Shouts echoed behind, boot steps thundered above. My breath tore from me in ragged bursts, the envelope's weight a fiery brand against my chest. The tunnel sloped downward, damp air pressing in. We crawled faster, every heartbeat a drum of urgency. Behind us, torchlight licked at the boards, and the echo of pursuit roared closer. At last, the passage spat us into another alley, narrow and slick with frost. We collapsed against the bricks, gasping for air. His face glowed pale in the lantern's faint light, eyes blazing with both gratitude and terror. We can't stop now, I whispered, gripping the envelope tight. He nodded, weak but resolute. To the magistrate, he rasped, before they find us again. We stumbled into the awakening market square, torches flaring behind us like predators' eyes. Guards poured into the streets, scanning faces, swords glinting in the dawn. He gripped my arm, breath ragged. We must reach the magistrate's hall before they seize the letter. The courthouse rose above the rooftops, its crest glimmering like both salvation and a snare. Our fate now lay in the city's heart, a place ruled by power, lies, and fragile hope. Moonlight turned the cobblestones into a mirror of ice. Every breath burned frost into our lungs. The ledger's weight against my chest was both proof and peril. Each step forward felt like choosing between justice and a frozen grave. The healer's alley spat us into the open night, our bodies trembling with exhaustion. Yet the chase allowed no pause. The city loomed around us in hushed menace, walls of stone glistening with ice, gutters clogged with frost, shadows thick with torchlight. My lantern swung wildly, scattering broken beams of gold against frozen brick, as if even light itself faltered under the burden of fear. Behind us, shouts carried through the night. The council's men had found our trail. Their boots struck like hammers, dogs bayed in hungry chorus, and the flames of their torches smeared against the frost like molten serpents. Faster, I hissed, yanking him forward. His body staggered beneath my grip, the blanket slipping from his shoulders. He stumbled, breath a ragged saw in his throat, yet his arm never loosened from the ledger pressed tight against his ribs. We cut down a narrow lane, where the walls seemed to fold in on themselves, crowding close like jaws eager to swallow us whole. Icicles drooped from the eaves, cracking and shattering as we brushed past. The alley ended at a wooden gate, bolted shut, ice welded into its frame. I dropped my lantern and heaved against the bar. It groaned, wood splintering, ice breaking into jagged shards. Together, with one desperate shove, we forced it open. The gate slammed behind us, muffling the baying of hounds, though not silencing it. We spilled into a yard cluttered with abandoned wagons and broken wheels. The moon glared overhead, silver against a sea of cloud. He leaned against a rotted beam, coughing so violently his body shook. I caught his shoulders, forcing him upright. "Not yet," I growled. "If you fall, we both fall." His eyes, fever-bright and haunted, locked onto mine. "They'll never stop," he rasped. "You don't know the power you've defied." I did know. The ledger's presence in my coat burned like a brand, ink heavy with corruption, greed, and blood. Still, I gritted my teeth. Then we outrun them until dawn. We scrambled over broken barrels, climbed a crumbling wall, and dropped into another street. The cobblestones stretched downhill toward the river, slick with ice, shining under the merciless moonlight. My boots slipped, my body crashing into his, but somehow we stayed upright, sliding more than running. Above us, the bell tower struck the hour, its toll echoing through the frozen city. The sound seemed to awaken the night. Shutters creaked open, whispers scattered, and the glow of fresh torches flared in every quarter. "They're everywhere," he wheezed. "Then we vanish in the crowd," I said. And indeed, ahead lay the market square, its stalls already stirring with early risers despite the frost. Fishermen unloaded baskets of glistening catch, breadmongers prepared ovens, children huddled in cloaks, stamping frozen feet. Ordinary life continued, unaware of the storm that pursued us. We plunged into the chaos, weaving between carts and oxen, past baskets of turnips and bales of wool. The smell of fresh bread tangled with wood smoke, warming the air for everyone but us. To the vendors, we were just two weary travelers. To the guards, we were quarry. I gripped his arm tighter. "Stay close. If they separate us." "They won't," he cut in, his voice hoarse but resolute. We ducked beneath an awning, dripping with frost, pressing ourselves into its shadows. Through the gaps between the cloth, I watched torches flare at the square's edge. The guards had arrived. Their armor clinked, their boots shattered silence, and their hounds strained at the leash, noses bent to the ground. He shivered against me, sweat damp on his brow despite the chill. "We can't hide forever." "No," I admitted, pulling the envelope deeper into my coat. "But we can run smarter than they can chase." His gaze darted toward the magistrate's hall, its towering spire visible over rooftops, lit by pale moonlight. The crest above its arch glimmered faintly. A beacon or a trap. "There," he whispered, voice filled with both dread and hope. I nodded, resolve setting in stone. We get the ledger to that bench before dawn, or we die trying. Behind us, the square erupted with shouts. The guards had loosed their hounds. I seized his hand, lantern clutched tight in the other, and dragged us into the open. Farmers shouted in protest as we toppled crates and spilled carrots across the stones, but we didn't stop. The magistrate's hall loomed closer, every step toward it echoing with both promise and peril. The ice beneath our boots cracked in spiderweb fissures as we raced across the square. The dogs' howls rose to a fever pitch, guards' blades caught the moonlight, and the ledger throbbed against my chest like a living heart. We reached the courthouse steps just as the first guard's torch flared at our backs. He stumbled, nearly collapsing, but I dragged him forward, breath tearing in my chest. The hall's doors stood shut, the keyhole glinting with frost. "Inside!" I shouted, slamming my fists against the ancient wood. Behind us the guards closed in, steel unsheathed, the night ready to devour us whole. A rickety ladder climbed into a darkness that smelled of dust and secrets. The rafters above promised either refuge or a trap. Each creak beneath our boots felt like a warning bell. In that loft, shadows kept more than silence. They kept memory. We burst from the market's chaos into a deserted cartwright's yard, its fences sagging, its yard littered with relics of a trade long abandoned. Broken wheels leaned against crumbling walls, iron rims half buried in snow, and rotted spokes sprawled like the bones of giants. Moonlight bled through fractured shutters, casting strips of silver across the frozen yard. "Here," he gasped, clutching the ledger beneath his arm as his knees threatened to buckle. He pointed to a ladder rising into the rafters of an old loft. Its rungs were warped with moss, slick with frost, but it was the only escape. I seized the ladder and pulled myself up, boots scraping on wet wood that moaned under my weight. Every creak sounded like a signal to the guards closing in. My lantern swung low, its beam cutting through dust-choked air. He followed, one trembling hand gripping the rung, the other clutching the ledger to his chest like a lifeline. At the top, I shoved open the hatch. Splinters rained down as it gave way, revealing a loft swallowed in shadows. Dust motes swirled in the lantern's glow, caught like fireflies in amber. I climbed through first, then reached down to pull him up. He collapsed beside me, chest heaving, blanket dragging like a ragged flag. The loft stretched wide, beams of ancient timber forming a cathedral of neglect. Crates stacked to the ceiling bore faded stencils, Garrick and Sons cartwrights, their paint cracked and flaking. Wheel hubs, rusted spokes, and axles piled in corners like the aftermath of a forgotten war. A musky smell of mold and damp straw lingered in the stale air. I lifted the lantern higher, revealing a corner bristling with old tools. Among them, iron rods sharpened into spears, bent crossbows, and a jagged sword thrust into a block of wood. My breath caught. "This place," I whispered. "Someone prepared for war." He approached the crates, brushing aside cobwebs with shaking hands. Behind one, he found a hidden cache, a rolled parchment, tied with a faded red ribbon. He spread it across a crate's lid, lantern light spilling over its yellowed surface. Lines and symbols etched in fading ink revealed tunnels beneath the city, smugglers' paths, secret fords, forgotten drains leading to the river. His eyes gleamed. "This is our way out," he murmured. "If we reach the catacombs, we can slip past the patrols. They'll guard the bridges, but they'll never guard what they've forgotten." I traced a finger along one tunnel leading from the docks under the magistrate's square. My heart surged with fragile hope. This map, it's salvation. But before relief could settle, the ladder below groaned. A dull thud echoed through the boards. Then another, boots climbing, heavy, determined. "They're here," I hissed. Panic flickered in his eyes. He snatched the map, rolled it tight, and stuffed it beneath his cloak. I doused the lantern, plunging us into near darkness. The only light was moonlight slipping through the loft's broken shingles. Dust clung to my throat as we crouched low, breaths shallow, hearts loud enough to betray us. The hatch below creaked open. Torchlight stabbed upward, casting beams across the rafters. A guard's helmeted head rose into view, followed by another, their armor clinking as they pulled themselves onto the loft floor. We crawled backward into the shadows between crates, muffling our breaths with our sleeves. My hand closed around the hilt of the jagged sword wedged in wood. It rattled, dust falling, but I held firm. The guards advanced slowly, torches sweeping. Their boots crunched against straw, echoing like thunder in the loft's silence. One prodded a crate, sending wheels tumbling. Another raised his torch higher, its flame licking rafters, shadows leaping like phantoms. "Search everywhere," one growled. We retreated deeper into the loft, feet silent on the dust. Then he pointed, toward the far corner where a tarp sagged against a beam. Beneath it a trap door was half hidden. Our last chance. I dropped to my knees and tugged the tarp free. The trapdoor's iron ring glinted faintly. With trembling hands, he pulled it open, revealing a staircase plunging into darkness, thick with the smell of hay and earth. "Hurry," he urged. I helped him descend, the ledger clutched tight under his cloak. The stairs groaned, but the shadows below welcomed us. I followed, lowering the trapdoor above just as torchlight swept past. The guards muttered above, oblivious for now. At the bottom, we landed in a row of abandoned stables. Broken troughs, loose boards, and rusted chains hung from beams. But the air was warmer, musky with straw. I lit the lantern again, its honeyed glow spilling across damp stone. He pressed the map flat against a beam. Here, he whispered, pointing to a symbol carved like a serpent. The tunnel begins beneath stall 31. We hurried along the stalls, numbers scratched in chalk, until we reached the loose board. He pried it aside, revealing a dark shaft lined with dripping brick. Cold air wafted up from below, carrying the scent of mold and river water. This is it, I said. He nodded, his face pale but resolute. Then we go, before the shadows catch us. We lowered ourselves into the tunnel, lantern light spilling down slick walls. The sound of guards above faded into muffled echoes, but the air grew colder, heavier. Ahead, the Obu tunnel split into two paths, each swallowing the light into endless black. The tunnel forked. One way led beneath the river, the other into the condemned catacombs. His hand clamped on my arm, voice shaking. Which path saves us? Drips echoed like whispers of the dead. Above, faint torchlight flickered through cracks in the floorboards. We had only heartbeats to choose between salvation and a tomb. Lantern light flickered across his haunted face. The truth he carried was darker than any winter's night. Trust trembled between us, fragile as glass. In that trembling glow, secrets threatened to burn us both. The tunnel spat us out into another forgotten loft, its beams sagging under centuries of neglect. I struck the lantern alive, its flame sputtering before steadying, casting honey-gold light on splintered crates and walls stained with soot. The air was thick with dust, tasting of ash and mildew. He collapsed onto a plank, knees drawn to his chest, blanket still wound around him like armor against a world that had only ever wounded him. His breaths came shallow, each inhale rattling with exhaustion, each exhale heavy with unspoken words. I sat opposite, lantern between us, watching his eyes flicker like the flame, haunted, hollow, and yet blazing with something fierce. He looked down at the ledger on his lap, its corners worn, its seal half broken by desperate hands. For a long while he said nothing. Only the sound of his trembling breath filled the silence, broken by the occasional creak of the rafters above. Finally he raised his head. "You saved me, more than once," he murmured, voice frayed at the edges. "But mercy has a price, and you deserve to know it." I leaned closer, pulse drumming in my ears. "Then tell me." His hand hovered over the ledger as though it might burn him. Fingers traced names inked in dark strokes, letters etched like curses. His jaw clenched, and his eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I wasn't just a witness," he whispered. "I was part of it." The lantern hissed, its flame bending as if recoiling from his confession. My throat tightened. "Part of what?" "The massacre," he rasped. "The nobles, the merchant triarchs, ordered it. They wanted farmland beyond the walls. They sent soldiers to drive out families, torch homes, and slaughter anyone who resisted. They needed someone to record it all for their accounts. That someone was me." The words hit like a hammer. My chest clenched, my breath staggered. He pressed on, unable to stop the tide now that it had begun. "I was their scribe," he said, voice hollow. "I tallied every life lost, every house burned, every field seized. I counted children like numbers on a page." His hands shook, clutching the ledger. I thought, if I wrote it down, it would matter. That someone would stop them. But instead I became their accomplice. Ink was my weapon. Silence, my crime. Tears burned hot in my eyes. The man I had saved, the Man I had trusted had carried not only the ledger of their sins, but his own. I wanted to recoil, to shove him away. And yet, his face told a different story. I couldn't live with it, he said, voice breaking. So I stole this ledger. I ran. They hunted me through alleys, through frost and shadow. If they catch me, they'll kill me not for defiance, but for betrayal. And maybe I deserve it. The lantern flickered, shadows twitching across the rafters. I studied him. The ledger. The firelight reflected in his tear-bright eyes. My anger melted into something heavier. Sorrow. You wrote their crimes, I whispered. But now you carry the proof. That doesn't make you their accomplice anymore. It makes you their undoing. He looked at me with something raw. Hope, fear, disbelief. You'd still stand with me, after knowing what I've done. I reached across the lantern's glow, gripping his trembling hand. We're both bound now. If mercy means anything, it means facing the truth together. You're not alone anymore. His shoulders sagged, a sob escaping his lips. The firelight trembled with him, its glow softening as though the loft itself breathed easier. For the first time, the ledger no longer looked like a curse, but a weapon forged from regret. But before the fragile piece could hold, dogs barked in the distance, fierce, urgent, closing fast. Boots pounded on cobblestones outside. The guards had found our trail again. His head snapped up, panic replacing hope. "They're here," he hissed. I snatched the lantern, its flame leaping. Shadows twisted like ghosts across the rafters. He clutched the ledger tighter, resolve hardening his trembling frame. We darted to the trapdoor, boots echoing on the boards. Above, voices shouted, steel clashed, wood splintered. The loft shook under their fury. I shoved him through the hatch, lantern swinging wildly. He landed hard below, blanket flaring like a banner of defiance. I followed, slamming the trap shut just as the loft door burst open. Torches stabbed through the cracks above, their light furious, searching. The air vibrated with the roar of pursuit. Yet in the darkness below, the lantern's glow cradled us still. Two fugitives bound not just by mercy, but by truth too heavy for one man to bear. The tunnel beneath us split into two veins, one toward the river, one into the condemned catacombs. Above, guards tore through crates, their torches blazing like judgment. His grip on the ledger tightened, his whisper ragged. We can't outrun them forever. My lantern trembled in my hand as I raised it high. One path meant survival, the other certain doom. But both demanded we choose, now. The river gleamed with fractures sharp as glass. Every step threatened to plunge us into a frozen grave. Yet across that deathly mirror lay our only path to justice. Each trembling breath felt like the world itself holding its judgment. The tunnel spat us, out into the open night, and the cold struck like a hammer. Wind howled across the riverbank, carrying with it blades of snow that cut through cloak and skin alike. Before us stretched the river, a vast expanse of ice, its surface webbed with cracks that shimmered under the moonlight like veins of glass. Beyond, on the far shore, the magistrate's manor glowed faintly, windows pulsing with warm amber light. Safety judgment, hope. Yet to reach it, we would have to cross this frozen graveyard. He knelt by the river's edge, hands shaking as he tested the ice with a splintered branch. Each tap echoed with an ominous groan, fissures spidering outward before settling. The lantern's glow caught the determination etched in his frost-burned face. "The North Channel is weakest," he murmured. "But if we go too far south, patrols will see us." I nodded, my throat tight. Then we tread between death and discovery. We stepped forward together, boots crunching softly on the ice. Every sound was magnified, each creak, each shift beneath our feet. My breath plumed in the air, thick and white, as though the river itself wanted to consume it. I carried the lantern high, its flame a fragile beacon. Behind me, he clutched the ledger to his chest. the blanket wrapped tight around his shoulders like a warrior's shroud. Halfway across, the ice beneath me groaned deep and hollow. A sharp crack split the silence, long, jagged, racing outward like lightning across glass. My heart lurched. I froze, breath locked in my lungs. Beneath the fissure, dark water churned, whispering promises of a cold, merciless grave. "Down," he shouted. Together we dropped to our knees, spreading our weight. The ice shivered, but held. My lantern wobbled dangerously before I steadied it, its flame sputtering but alive. I dared not breathe until the cracks ceased their crawl. We crawled forward, inch by inch, knees burning from the cold that seeped through wool. The manor's lights glowed brighter now, each window a promise we couldn't yet touch. He moved beside me, jaw clenched, eyes fixed on the shore. The ledger bulged against his chest, its weight not only of ink and paper, but of hundreds of silenced voices. Suddenly his hand slipped, palm crashing against a weak patch. Ice shattered beneath his weight. Water surged upward, black and furious. He cried out, body plunging forward as the crack yawned open. Without thought, I lunged, grabbing his arm. The ice groaned, threatening to give beneath us both. My grip strained, his breath came ragged and panicked. "Pull!" I snarled through gritted teeth. He kicked, boots striking ice, while I heaved with everything left in me. At last, he collapsed against the surface, gasping, soaked sleeve freezing instantly in the night air. We lay there, shivering, hearts hammering against the silence. For a moment, I thought we would never rise again. But then he whispered, voice raw, "We're too close to stop." I forced myself up, lantern clutched tight, and offered him my hand. Together, we staggered across the final stretch, every step a battle between will and collapse. At last, boots struck solid earth. We stumbled onto the snow-draped shore, lungs burning, bodies trembling, but alive. The manor loomed above, its doors carved with the city's crest. Warm light spilled down the path, as though mercy itself beckoned us inside. Yet before we could take another step, the sound of hooves split the night, guards converging, torches blazing across the ridge. He gripped my arm, eyes fierce despite exhaustion. "No more running," he said. "Tonight, we face them." Torches bobbed across the hill, steel flashing under the moon. The manor gates stood ahead, our only sanctuary or our execution ground. The ice behind us groaned, splitting wider with each gust of wind. I raised the lantern high, its glow trembling. One step forward meant justice. One step back meant oblivion. Marble pillars towered above, their gleam cold as steel. He placed the sealed ledger on the magistrate's bench, its weight heavier than chains. The chamber's hush pressed against our lungs, like a verdict unspoken. Every breath felt sacrilegious in this temple of power. We forced the manor's doors open with the last of our strength, collapsing into warmth that struck like a storm against our frost-numbed skin. The grand hall of judgment stretched before us, a cathedral of marble and law. Columns of white stone soared upward, etched with scales of justice, their surfaces polished to reflect torchlight in fractured gold. The floor was a mirror of obsidian tiles, each step echoing sharp and final, like the clang of a gavel. Above, chandeliers hung heavy with crystal, their candles dripping light in constellations across the vaulted ceiling. Angels with swords and blindfolds stared down from frescoed arches, their painted faces frozen in eternal demand for truth. The hush of the chamber was not silence. It was judgment, breathing, waiting. The magistrate sat upon a dais of red marble at the far end, robed in ermine and gold, silver hair gleaming like steel in firelight. His eyes, hooded and sharp, fell upon us. In their gaze I felt both disdain and hunger, the way a hawk watches prey, but also admires its fight. We staggered forward, our boots squealing against polished stone. I clutched the lantern, its flame weak but unbroken, while he, once a beggar wrapped in rags, now strode with quiet resolve. He placed the sealed ledger upon the magistrate's bench. Its silver crest caught the light, and the chamber seemed to exhale as nobles, merchants, and commoners alike leaned forward. A murmur rippled, hushed but electric. The magistrate lifted one brow, tapping the carved lion's head of his chair. "What is this?" his voice thundered, low and resonant. He stood taller, though his body trembled from cold and hunger. "The truth," he said simply, voice hoarse but unwavering. "The names, the crimes, the betrayals of your council and their nobles. Every sin inked here in their own hand, gasps hissed across the benches." A noblewoman clutched her pearls. A merchant's hand froze mid-scroll. The magistrate's gavel hovered, uncertain, as though weighing centuries of silence against this single ledger. He gestured to me. "You," the magistrate barked. "Do you vouch for this man?" I stepped forward, knees trembling yet voice firm. "I do. I saw the fires. I heard the screams. I watched families torn from their homes as the nobles you defend fattened their purses. This ledger does not lie, and neither will I." A roar of whispers filled the air. Some cried, "Slander." Others shouted, "At last." The marble walls trembled with the collision of fear and fury. The magistrate's eyes narrowed. "Grave accusations demand proof beyond parchment." He opened the ledger, its pages brittle but damning. Names unfurled like curses. Sir Aldrich Thorne, Duke Marwyn Joss, Lady Elora Vox. Each entry described theft, arson, and slaughter disguised as law. The chamber grew heavy with every revelation. Commoners wept softly. Nobles turned pale. A widow in gray rose from the crowd, voice cracking. "My farm burned at dawn. My children buried in snow." This ledger speaks true. The magistrate's fingers tightened on his gavel. Silence in the court. Yet his voice shook, the weight of truth pressing even him. He leaned forward, lips tight. "If I recognize these crimes, the kingdom itself trembles. Are you prepared for what that unleashes?" The beggar, no longer frail, no longer nameless, met his gaze with fire. "Better a kingdom shaken by truth than rotting in lies." A hush fell again, deeper than before. For a heartbeat, I believed justice had taken root. But then the hall's double doors burst open. A royal courier, cloaked in crimson, stormed forward. He unfurled a golden scroll, voice ringing like a trumpet. "By decree of His Majesty, King Alaric IV, all charges of high treason shall be judged only in the royal court. These men and their ledger are summoned to the capital at once." Shock rippled like thunder. Some cried relief, others dread. The magistrate struck his gavel once, final and sharp. "So be it." "Guards, escort them to the royal carriage," steel boots echoed. Hands gripped our shoulders, not with hostility, but grim duty. As we were led down the aisle, every gaze followed, some with hope, some with venom. The ledger throbbed against his chest like a living heart. I glanced at him. Fear, pride, and defiance warred in his eyes. He whispered, barely audible, "We've only begun." The gilded doors slammed shut behind us, the roar of the hall fading into winter air. Outside, a carriage waited, its lamps glowing like eyes of fate. Royal guards flanked us, their armor bright, their silence heavy. The road stretched toward the capital, where kings decide mercy, or demand blood. The ledger burned between us, its truth too heavy to carry back. My defiant words thundered across marble vaults. Witnesses rose from slums and ruins to speak their truth. The crowd's roar for justice shook pillars carved by kings. In that moment, I knew mercy and retribution balanced on a knife's edge. The capital's great hall was a theater of power. Its marble walls soared upward into arches painted with scales, swords, and blindfolded deities, mocking ideals of impartiality that had too long been betrayed. Chandeliers of crystal rained golden light over the crowd, glinting on jeweled robes of nobles and calloused hands of commoners. The benches overflowed. Nobles pressed close in silks and furs. Merchants in velvet clutched their ledgers like shields, and peasants in patched coats stood at the edges, their faces pale with hunger, but blazing with hope. All eyes locked upon us as we approached the dais where the king's magistrates sat in judgment, the great ledger of crimes held like a burning brand in Rowan's hands. I stepped forward first, voice carrying through the vast chamber. "Honorable court, gathered council, and people of the realm," I declared, my words echoing like a tolling bell. "You have seen this ledger. It names those who betrayed their own people, who turned fields into ashes and blood into coin. Justice demands not silence, but action." "A silence deeper than frost," answered me. I turned toward Rowan, who rose with trembling but unbroken resolve. His cloak shifted as he lifted the ledger high for all to see. "I was commanded to record their atrocities," he said, voice rough with both pain and defiance. "I saw children starve, widows wail, and villages burned at dawn. They called it progress. I call it murder." Gasps rippled through the chamber. A counselor in violet robes leapt to his feet. "Slander," he cried. "This man is a thief, a fugitive. Why should we believe him?" Before Rowan could answer, a frail woman in gray rose from the benches reserved for the common folk. Her voice cracked like dry wood. "Because I saw my own barn aflame while my children froze inside." She clutched her shawl tighter. "The names in that book match the men who came with torches." A murmur swelled like a rising tide. Then a young boy, scarcely taller than the railing, stepped forward. His hair was matted, his cheeks hollow, but his voice rang clear. "My father was cut down when he tried to stop them. I buried him with my own hands. That book tells the truth." The air trembled with outrage. Merchants shifted uneasily. Nobles blanched. The gallery thundered with cries. "Justice! Truth! No more lies!" I raised my hand, calling for silence, though my heart pounded like war drums. "These people have spoken. Their voices echo the ink of this ledger. Will you ignore both parchment and flesh? Will you silence truth again with gold?" The magistrate's gavel struck wood, but the hall did not fall silent. It roared louder, like the sea breaking against cliffs. Rowan stepped to my side, his eyes fierce. "We stand not for vengeance," he cried, "but for justice. Let their wealth rebuild the homes they burned. Let their labor restore the fields they poisoned. Let truth at last take root." The magistrate's hand hovered, torn between order and chaos. Finally he rose, voice booming above the din. "By authority of this court, and in defense of the crown's honor, I order the arrest and detainment of those named within the ledger." Gasps gave way to shouts of triumph. Guards surged forward, seizing nobles in jeweled cloaks. Sir Aldrich Thorne was dragged from his seat, his emerald rings clattering onto marble. Duke Marwyn Joss spat curses as chains closed around his wrists. Lady Elira Vox wept as she was led past the widow she had ruined. The people erupted. Cries of joy and fury mingled, echoing beneath frescoed ceilings. Yet even in that moment of triumph, a horn blast split the air. The great doors thundered open. A royal envoy in crimson strode in, cloak billowing, scroll in hand. His voice rang with finality. "By decree of His Majesty, all matters of high treason must be judged in the king's own court. These accused and their accusers are summoned to the throne within 7 days." The chamber fell into stunned silence. Triumph turned to dread, victory into uncertainty. Rowan gripped the ledger tighter, his eyes burning with defiance. He whispered to me, voice steady despite the storm. "Our fight has only begun." The nobles, bound in chains, are dragged toward waiting carriages. The envoy's crimson banner flutters like blood in a torchlight. The crowd chants for justice, but fear trembles beneath their cries. Rowan presses the ledger into my hands. "To the king," he murmurs. The road to the throne stretches ahead, a path lined with peril and truth. Dawn's scaffold loomed like a shadow against the rising sun. Vengeance beckoned sharp as the noose, yet mercy called louder. Chains rattled, but hearts trembled more. That morning I learned compassion could break iron. The square was hushed in reverence and fear. Frost still clung to rooftops, glittering beneath pale dawn, but all warmth seemed stolen by the scaffold at the center. Its beam stood tall, the noose swaying lazily in the breeze like an unanswered question. Beneath it, nobles once cloaked in silks now shivered in plain robes, iron cuffs biting into their wrists. Their jeweled rings were stripped, their heads bowed, not in humility, but in disbelief. Rows upon rows of townsfolk crowded the square. Farmers wrapped in patched coats, orphans clutching hands, widows in mourning black. Some carried banners scrawled with charcoal, "Justice for Peatfield," "Truth for the Fallen." Their breath rose in unison, a mist of anticipation, sorrow, and hunger for justice. The magistrate ascended the dais, robes trailing over icy wood. His gavel's thud cut the silence like a blade. "By decree of this court," he proclaimed, voice echoing through frosted air, "these nobles stand condemned for arson, extortion, and murder. The scaffold awaits their payment in blood." The crowd stirred, voices crackling like kindling ready to ignite. Yet the magistrate's hand lifted, halting the storm. "But the law," he continued, voice steady, "allows for clemency when mercy yields greater justice. If the people demand mercy, these condemned may live, not free but bound by restitution." A ripple of shock passed through the crowd. All eyes turned, searching for who would speak first. I felt Rowan's elbow nudge me. His voice, low but urgent, whispered, "This is the moment. Mercy is the stronger blade." Heart hammering, I stepped forward, my boots thudding against the scaffold steps. I raised my voice so even the farthest child could hear. "People of the realm," I cried, "what reward is vengeance if it only breeds more pain? Let their gold rebuild what they burned. Let their labor restore what they destroyed. Justice without mercy leaves us hollow. But justice with mercy can heal." Silence. Then, movement. A widow in gray, face lined with grief, shuffled forward. Her voice shook. My barn was torched. My children froze in the ashes. Yet, she lifted her chin, eyes glistening. "If their hands can rebuild what they ruined, let mercy reign. Let their shame feed the hungry." A child's thin voice followed. Little Tom, the orphan who had once spoken in court, clutched the rail. "Don't hang them. Make them work. Make them give back. My father is gone. No rope can bring him back." The square rumbled as voices rose, some in anger, others in agreement. Farmers demanded new plows, artisans demanded restitution, and mothers demanded food for their children. Slowly, the cry for vengeance twisted into a chant for restoration. The magistrate lifted his gavel again. "Then let it be law," he declared. "The condemned are pardoned from death, on condition of restitution, their estates seized, their coin spent in rebuilding, their labor pledged to mend what they destroyed. Should they fail, the scaffold will wait still." Gasps broke into cheers. Guards moved forward, not to tighten the noose, but to strike off the noble's chains. Sir Aldrich Thorne collapsed to his knees before the widow who had spoken. "I will rebuild your barn with these hands," he swore, voice hoarse. She hesitated, then placed her trembling hand over his. Lady Elira Vox lowered her head before a line of craftsmen, voice breaking. "Teach me your trade. Let me repay every debt in brick and sweat." The people surged, not with fury, but with cautious hope. Farmers pressed spades into noble hands. Orphans offered wildflowers instead of curses. For the first time, mercy seemed not weakness, but strength. Then came the blast of a horn. The crowd parted as a royal envoy rode into the square, cloak crimson, seal of the crown in hand. His voice rang like iron on stone. By command of His Majesty, this act of mercy shall be recognized by the throne. These nobles shall live, but under the watch of the People's Council. Let mercy be law across the realm. The cheer that followed shook frost from the eaves. Rowan gripped my shoulder, eyes bright. "We've turned vengeance into hope," he whispered. I exhaled, heart trembling. Then mercy has forged more than pardon. It has forged a kingdom reborn, freed nobles bow, tears mixing with frost. The envoy unrolls a second scroll. The king summons you both. The square hushes, dread and wonder mingling in the air. Rowan grips the ledger, eyes burning. Our mercy has sparked hope, but the king's summons promises storms yet to come. Chains of compassion bound us tighter than iron. The city gates opened, not for fugitives, but for heralds of mercy. With blanket, ledger, and sword, we carried more than hope. At dawn's crest, an empire of promise began to march. The city of Elderwood awoke with a roar of voices. Frost still silvered the cobblestones, yet warmth pulsed in the air, born not from hearths, but from hearts newly freed of fear. From the ramparts, crimson and emerald banners snapped in the dawn breeze. Below, the gates creaked open, iron grinding like the end of an old age. I stood at the head of a wooden platform, Rowan beside me. His cloak caught the first light, the Heartstone glowing like a captured sun at his chest. Beneath my arm lay the patched blanket, the same one I had given to a stranger in snow, now folded like a relic of everything we had endured. The ledger rested under my coat, its ink still binding oaths too weighty for one man alone. Before us stretched a caravan of ox-drawn carts. Their wheels gleamed with fresh grease, their wooden sides stamped with the crest of the People's Council, scales intertwined with an open hand. Canvas covers bulged with grain sacks, medicinal herbs, and tools. Each cart a promise carved in wood and iron. The mayor, robed in gold-trimmed wool, raised his staff. "Today," he proclaimed, voice booming across the square, "we send forth not exiles, but ambassadors of mercy. Let these carts carry food where famine struck, tools where tyranny broke, and charters where law faltered. May their journey bind our villages in compassion's embrace." The crowd erupted, farmers waving pitchforks in salute, artisans lifting chisels, children releasing ribbons of bright cloth into the air. Their chant rose like thunder. "Rebuild, restore, renew." Rowan tightened his grip on the reins of the lead cart. "It begins," he whispered. His eyes, once haunted by alleys and frost, now burned with steady fire. We crossed beneath the gates, cheers echoing against the stone. Beyond lay the road east, winding through snow-touched fields where farmers paused their plowing to wave. Children sprinted barefoot alongside, laughter chasing our wheels. A girl no older than 10 darted forward, clutching a sprig of lavender. I slowed the cart, and she tucked it into the Heartstone's clasp with a shy smile. Rowan bent low, pressing a hand to her head. For a heartbeat, mercy itself seemed to bloom in her eyes. Our first stop was Willowhearth, a village scarred by famine and fire. We set up the first new market under a pavilion of stitched canvas. Villagers gathered, shawls pulled tight, eyes hungry not just for food, but for hope. Rowan read the charter aloud, his voice carrying across the square. Fair trade, protection under the council, and the Heartstone's blessing for all who pledged peace. When he finished, I dipped the quill into ink and signed beside his name. A hush lingered, then erupted into cheers. Farmers raised sheaves of grain, smiths clanged hammers against anvils, children danced in circles around the carts. Music spilled from fiddles, flutes, and drums until dusk painted the sky in gold and violet. That night we camped by a grove. Fires flickered in iron bowls, and Rowan ladled stew into wooden bowls. He lifted his spoon. "To mercy," he said, voice low yet fierce. "To promise," I replied, clinking my bowl against his. By dawn, we pressed onward, carts creaking toward Stonebridge. There, villagers who had lived under bandits and tollmen welcomed us with weary eyes. At the ford, Rowan brokered peace between rival guilds, his sword laid on the ground as a symbol of truth stronger than steel. I pledged grain reserves for their apprentices, binding their loyalty not with gold, but with nourishment. That evening at Falcon's Rest, we convened the Harvest Guardians, riders sworn to defend the caravan's path. Around the fire, Rowan's voice rang like steel. You are not soldiers of conquest. You are stewards of mercy, keepers of trust. Every life you protect binds this realm together. One by one, they clasped hands, pledging themselves beneath the Heartstone's glow. When night deepened, Rowan and I walked the riverbank. The water mirrored stars and stone alike, reflecting the enormity of what we carried. Look how far we've come, he said softly. I touched the ledger under my cloak. And how far we must still go. He nodded, resolve bright in his gaze. Because mercy is not a word, it is a road. And we walk it together. As dawn spilled across the horizon, sails glimmered on the estuary ahead, foreign ships bearing banners of cobalt and gold. Rowan's grip tightened on the ledger. His whisper cut through the morning wind. They've come for the truth. The caravan slowed, the Harvest Guardians tightening their formation. For the first time since Elderwood's gates, silence fell heavy, expectant. We had bound a city in mercy, but now the world had come to test our promise. The sun crowns the ridge as foreign ships dock, banners snapping in salt wind. Rowan clutches the ledger, eyes fierce. They seek mercy, or they seek to bury it. Guards mount their steeds. The caravan halts mid-road. Across the horizon, drums echo from the ship's decks. Mercy's voyage has left the city. Now the world demands its proof. Sunset painted the waves in molten gold. With the Heartstone as our compass, we stepped onto a royal ship. Compassion's greatest journey waited over storm-lit horizons. Each sway of the deck whispered both promise and peril. The docks of Port Aurora pulsed with life, lanterns swinging above a forest of masts, sails snapping like restless wings in the wind. The sea, kissed by dusk's last light, shimmered with hues of copper and violet. Dock workers shouted. Ropes strained, and gulls wheeled overhead in raucous chorus. Yet amid this cacophony stood the Empress of Aurelion, a ship carved of mahogany and crowned with a phoenix figurehead, its sapphire eyes blazing with twilight fire. Our caravan rolled to a halt at the quay, oxen steaming in the chill air. Villagers, merchants, and guardians who had marched with us through snow and stone now stood silent, hands raised in salute. Each face bore the marks of toil and hardship, yet their eyes gleamed with something new, faith. This was not farewell, it was benediction. Rowan and I walked the gangplank side by side. His cloak snapped in the salt wind, the Heartstone glowing like a star against his chest. Beneath my arm, the blanket rested, folded yet heavy with memory. The ledger hung at my back, leather binding creaking as though aware of the sea's summons. At the top of the gangway, the king's herald unfurled a crimson scroll. His voice rang clear. By order of His Majesty Alaric IV, Rowan of the Heartstone and his companion, bearers of the Ledger of Truth, are hereby charged to spread the charter of mercy across all realms. Let no sea or storm hinder this covenant. Crewmen bowed as the decree ended. Drums rolled, anchors clanked, sails unfurled. With a shudder and groan, the Empress cut free from land. The docks receded, the crowd's cheers fading to whispers against the tide. For the first time, mercy sailed. Below deck, the captain, Maris Draven, scarred by storms yet steady as stone, welcomed us in her oak-paneled cabin. A map sprawled across her table, inked with coastlines and isles we had only heard in fireside tales. Gallowmere, Istraven, the shattered coast. Her finger traced the trade winds southward. Your duty, she said, voice like a drumbeat, is not only to carry charters, but to withstand those who thrive on greed. Pirates, lords, even kings who profit from misery will see you as a threat. Rowan met her gaze without flinching. Then we bring them light, or we stand as its shield. That night, the sea tested our vow. A storm rose from the west, black clouds rolling like a wall, lightning tearing jagged wounds in the sky. The Empress groaned as waves hammered her hull. Sailors scrambled to reef canvas. Ropes snapped like whips in the wind. Water surged over the deck, icy spray blinding our eyes. Rowan clung to the helm, the Heartstone blazing faint gold against the storm's fury. I lashed barrels and crates, hands raw against sodden rope. For hours we battled wind and water. At every crash, it felt as though the ocean itself sought to drown our mission before it began. Yet as dawn broke, clouds fractured, revealing a sky brushed with pale fire. The crew cheered, exhausted but unbroken. The storm had tested us, and we had endured. By noon, jagged cliffs rose on the horizon, the Isles of Gallowmere, crowned with white cottages and smoke curling from stone chimneys. Bells tolled from the port of New Haven as we entered its sheltered bay, sails trimmed and anchor chains rattling. On the quay, guildmasters and villagers gathered, robes of velvet beside shawls of wool. Suspicion flickered in their eyes. This was a realm where merchants grew fat on famine. Rowan lifted the Heartstone high, its light scattering across the water. "We come," he declared, voice carrying over waves and roofs alike. "Not to conquer, but to covenant. The charter of mercy binds us all, or none." Gasps rippled as I unrolled the parchment charter, its seal catching sunlight. One by one, guild leaders approached. Some hesitated, weighing profit against justice. Yet hands still dipped quills in ink, binding their names beside ours. The crowd erupted in applause, not thunderous, but steady, like the first heartbeat of trust. That evening, as lamps glowed along cobbled streets, Rowan and I sat in a tavern where villagers pressed forward with stories of drought, war, and exile. Each tale carved new lines of resolve on our faces. The world was larger, darker, and more broken than we had imagined, yet so was its hunger for hope. At dawn, we boarded the Empress once more. The harbor faded into mist, gulls wheeling overhead as sails caught the southern wind. The sea stretched endless before us, a living mirror of both peril and promise. Rowan stood at the bow, Heartstone blazing like a sun caught in crystal. I touched the ledger at my side, its weight steady and true. "Mercy began with one blanket," I whispered. "Now it spans oceans." He smiled faintly, eyes on the horizon. "And its truest test waits beyond every wave." Lightning flickered far ahead, painting storm clouds silver. Shouts rose below deck. Rival envoys had boarded under cover of night. Swords clashed in the hold, cries echoing through the ship's ribs. Rowan's hand found mine. His whisper cut through the thunder. "Hold fast." The deck rocks as lightning splits the sky, storm and steel colliding in chaos. Below, the clash of blades rises, traitors moving against us. Rowan clasps the ledger close, cloak whipping in the wind. Across the horizon, a second fleet approaches, banners unknown. Mercy has left the shore, but the sea demands its price. If Rowan's leap from alley shadows to royal decks stirred your heart, smash that like button and let the world know compassion wins. Hit subscribe and ring the bell to join our band of justice seekers. Don't miss the next twist in our epic voyage. Drop a comment with your most inspiring moment, whose mercy moved you to believe in change. Share this tale with someone who needs hope today, and together we'll light the way for every lost soul.